So I'm going to show you how I built this radiator cover with a removable top and just a bunch of 2x3, 1x pine, and some white paint and some shellac finish. That's it. Minimal tools needed. It's a little long because all the slats process, but it's a fairly easy project. And also put made my own little trim molding pieces here. Some good, nice little finish touches, but that's it. Kept as simple as possible, and it's built. Just remove the top. Little finger slots in there. These slide right over the radiators. Okay, so here goes. So this project is going to start with some 2x3s. I use Idaho Prime, which is a little sturdier pine. Yeah, you get at the big box stores. I know people frown upon that, but actually it's better than most pine I get at lumber yards. You got to really just pick through the pile to find so much straight boards. Now I will mill this up. As you see here, I'm going to start with the table saw. I'll cut the rough length, and then I will joint and plane and also run to the table saw just to get the final dimensions, and then I'll probably cut again to the final length. But this is where I start. I know it's pine, but after you paint it, it looks pretty good. As long as you mill it up correctly, it will come out straight. So next I'm going to see what size I want to put the pocket holes in. So obviously the least nicer side will get the pocket holes. The nicer side, exposed side, won't. Alright, so that's the next step. Okay, so after I put the pocket holes in, so now I'm going to run each edge through the router table. I'm just going to put a chamfer on each edge to give it a nice little soft edge that you see here. And just a 45-degree chamfer. I don't go too aggressive with this because I want to still have a square look. Alright, so now is where I do the assembly of the side stretchers to the legs. So this I'll do first. I'll let it glue up for a little bit, and then I'll do the front and back stretchers or aprons. So this is where I'm doing here. I'm just going to use some clamps. As you see, I have some spacers on the table there to give me my reveal. I'm going to use a little glue and some, I think these are 2-inch pocket screws. And because I'm going into the wood, and it's kind of thick. I didn't mill this up too much through the planer, just a tiny bit. And I'm just going to use clamp and even pressure. And also it's good to have a square round too, and make sure everything's squaring up nice and straight. So this is where I'm at now. We're just going to do the assembly here, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so that frame is built. So now I'm going to find the center of the front and also the center on both sides. And this is, I'm going to put a center divider in back with a piece of plywood, and it's going to give us some layers and texture, and also a place for the mold and finish that we're going to cut later to go around the front with the slats. So that's what we're doing now. We're just going to find that center on both sides and the front. Okay, so here I'm just trying to find the top cleats here. I'm going to put them on the sides just to hold the top in, the removable top, as we get to laminate that later. So this will just hold the top with some brad nails. There's little cleats. We'll just hold the top in place. So here I'm just using an old 2x12, probably a couple here, and I'm going to be cutting this to rough length, and I'm going to be ripping on a table saw for the slats. So that's all I'm using this wood for right now, just to utilize it. It's been laying around my shop, and we'll plane it and mill it up, and it's going to be painted, so you won't be able to tell that it was old used wood. Okay, so here I'm going to create a little jig for the spacers for the slats. I had an old one somewhere, but I can't find it, so I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to cut this into 3 pieces, 1 long piece and 2 smaller pieces. And this will just help me space out the slats correctly. And that's very important that they're evenly spaced out, especially when you dry fit them. So you have an idea how many you need on each side. Okay, so I'm using a little speed combination square to space it out and glue and clamp, let it sit for a little bit. And next step is going to be I'm going to start milling up the slats through the planer. And I don't run them through the joiner because they're pretty straight going through the table saw. So I'm just going to plane them and get them to the final thickness. Okay, so here's a real vital part of this project, to me at least, because this is the most stressful part. So I'm going to cut these long strips. I'm going to cut them a little wide to start, and then I'm going to run them through the router table with like an ogle type trim bit, and that's just to create the profile on these strips. And after I trim them up with the router table, I'm going to cut them to the final thickness on the table saw again, as you'll see. So I'm just explaining what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to set the router table. I'm going to run it a little wide, a little thick. So that way, it's just more for safety. So I don't, split the wood or, cut my fingers. Obviously, I like to keep my fingers. So it just keeps it safer to have the wood a little wider. Here, so here it is here. I'm going to run it through real slow, try not to get any tear out. Keep everything nice and consistent, and then I'll cut for the final thickness, as you see here. It's just a safer process. So here I'm just going to clean up a little bit with the sand and paper on a little piece of round stock, just to get inside these grooves, sand it up, clean it up. And now I pulled out my little miter saw. I use this mainly for trim work, and I'm just going to cut a bunch of 45-degree angles, fit them in, just eye it up, and then I'm going to use a pin nailer to pin nail these into the frame. Okay, so next I'm going to set up the sprayer. I'm going to spray a little primer and then 2 coats, or actually it's going to be 3 coats, because I'm going to spray the inside of the slats later, and just another coat over top of everything after I install the slats. So I'm going to paint everything now, primer and paint at least 1 coat now before I put the slats on. It's just easier to paint the slats separately to get inside the edges and everything, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going to paint them all separately, and then put together after. Then do another coat of paint, as you'll see. Okay, so now I'm going to take some 1x8s, which are roughly 7 1/4, 7 1/2 inch wide, which is what I need for the top. So they're going to be 58 inches long, and they're going to be just under 15 inches wide. So laminated, they're going to come out to about that little room to spare to fit in there. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just going to mill this up and laminate it next. So after milling this up, I'm going to laminate this. I'm going to use biscuits and glue, and that's the next step here. I'm just going to clamp it, not too much pressure, just get a nice even clamping, and let it sit for about I'm going to say 5 to 6 hours at least. It's a little cold, but it's not too cold right now, so the glue is going to dry probably within 5 or 6 hours. Okay, so while the top is laminating and drying, I'm going to start dry fitting these slats using the spacer jig I made earlier that I just took out of clamps. So I'm going to use that and also the 2 other pieces to start dry fitting this, just to make sure I have even spacing on both sides of the center, and then we'll start brad nailing them in. I'm just going to use 18 gauge brad nails. I believe I'm using just 1-inch brads. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to use the spacers and take our time, just go right down the line and just brad nail them all in. Okay, so now I have the slats in, I'm going to do another last coat of paint, and I'm going to paint the insides too. I'm not going to go crazy in there because it's not going to be exposed, but I will paint that. And now we're going to go back to the top. We're going to just mill that or sand that up, clean it up. We're going to start with 80 grit, work our way up to 220, and we're going to also run a little chamfer here, as you see, and clean up the final sand. So now here we're going to put their little finger hole in the pot, this top off when they need to. I'm just going to use I think it's a 1.5 inch Forstner bit, and then I'll use a jigsaw to clean it up, which you'll see in a couple seconds here. So we just take our time, just go real slow. I don't want to split the wood, and just kind of go through with this without splitting the bottom or the top of this by forcing it. So now we just clean up the jigsaw here, and they came out nice, and it lets the client be able to pull the top off to bleed the radiator when they need to. I also run a little round over bit here too, just to smoothing out the edges here on the finger holes. Okay, so now we're going to paint the top, bottom, and the top of the top, and just going to 2 coats of white, and also just finish up a little shellac, so not too much because shellac sometimes yellows the paint. So this project's done. It was fun to make. The client loved it. It came out very nice, structural furniture, and if you'd like, you can make this. Any comments, I can try to give as much advice as I can. You can make pretty good money making these. These are one of the first things I built to start my business years ago, and they're not the biggest seller, but they do sell, and they're a lot of wood, a lot of work, but they're pretty easy to make, and just take your time. If you like, hit subscribe, like, comment, and have a good day. Thanks for watching.